Cameras were everywhere, flashing, clicking, waiting. King Charles stepped out of the black Bentley, his polished shoes meeting the red carpet with a grace perfected over decades. The crowd erupted. Cheers echoed across the stone courtyard of Westminster Abbey. It was his 500th official engagement since becoming king. A milestone. A celebration. But no one saw what Corporal James Henley saw. James stood rigid in his ceremonial uniform. Red tunic pressed, bearskin hat towering above his head. He was part of the Royal Guard, silent, still invisible to most. His job was simple. Stand, observe, protect. He had done it 1,000 times before. Weddings, state dinners, funerals. But today, something felt different. The king smiled and waved. The crowd loved him. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every gesture, every gracious nod. Charles moved toward the entrance, flanked by aides and security. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked controlled. But James noticed the king's hand. It trembled, just slightly. Just enough. Charles reached for the stone pillar near the abbey door, steadying himself as though adjusting his coat. The crowd didn't notice. The cameras didn't catch it. But James did. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. And in that moment, James saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Fear. Before you find out what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because this story takes a turn no one saw coming. The king's aide stepped forward, whispering something. Charles nodded, his smile never faltering. He turned toward the grand entrance, walking with the same measured dignity the world expected. But James's instincts kicked in. Years of training. Years of reading body language, scanning for threats, watching for the invisible. Something was wrong. Charles took another step. Then his knees buckled. It happened so fast that even the trained security detail didn't react in time. One moment the king was upright. The next, he was falling forward, his body going limp like a puppet with its strings cut. James didn't think. He moved in 3 strides. He broke formation, a violation of protocol that could end his career. His arms shot out just as Charles collapsed, catching the king's weight against his chest. The impact jolted through him, but he held firm, cradling the unconscious monarch like a child. For a heartbeat, the world froze. The crowd gasped. Cameras swiveled. Security swarmed. But in that single suspended moment, it was just James and the king. Charles's face was pale, his breathing shallow, his eyes closed. "Your Majesty," James whispered, his voice cracking. "Stay with me." The king's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. James leaned closer. "Let them see." Then the chaos hit. Agents rushed in, shouting orders. Someone grabbed James's shoulder, trying to pull him away. Cameras pushed forward, desperate for the shot. The crowd surged, confused and frightened. Voices overlapped. Panic spread like wildfire, but James didn't let go. Get him inside. Someone screamed, "Clear the area." "Where's the medic?" James lifted the king, his arms shaking under the weight and adrenaline. He moved toward the abbey doors, his mind racing. What had just happened? Was it a heart attack? A stroke? Or something else entirely? The massive wooden doors swung open. James carried the king into the cool darkness of the abbey, away from the cameras, away from the world. Behind him, security formed a wall, blocking the entrance. The doors slammed shut, and in that moment, James realized something terrifying. He wasn't just a guard. Anymore, he was the only person who knew what the king had whispered. The only person who could protect a secret that could shake the entire nation. But what was that secret? And why did the king collapse? Inside the abbey, the air was cold and heavy with the scent of old stone and candle wax. James's boots echoed against the marble floor as he carried the king deeper into the shadows. His arms burned, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. "This way." A voice cut through the darkness. A woman in a navy suit appeared from a side corridor, her face tight with urgency. Dr. Sarah Okafor, the king's personal physician. James had seen her before at royal events, always nearby, always watchful. Lay him here. She gestured to a wooden bench along the wall. James gently lowered the king onto the bench. Charles's eyes remained closed, his breathing still too shallow. Too weak? Dr. Okafor dropped to her knees beside him, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, checking his pulse, lifting his eyelids, pressing her fingers against his neck. How long was he unconscious? She asked without looking up. 30 seconds. Maybe less? Did he say anything? James hesitated. The king's whispered words echoed in his mind. Don't let them see. James Lead? Nothing. Dr. Okafor's eyes flicked to him, sharp and knowing. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press. Instead, she pulled a small penlight from her pocket and shone it into the king's eyes. Your Majesty, she said softly. Can you hear me? Charles stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, unfocused at first, then slowly sharpening. He looked at the vaulted ceiling above, then at Dr. Okafor, then at James. Recognition flickered across his face. You. Charles's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. You caught me. James nodded, unable to speak. Thank you, Your Majesty. Please don't try to move, Dr. Okafor said firmly. We need to get you to the hospital. No. The word came out stronger than expected. Charles tried to sit up, but Dr. Okafor placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. You collapsed. You need medical attention. I said no. Charles's tone left no room for argument. He looked past her, directly at James. What did you see? James's throat tightened. I saw you fall, sir. Nothing more? And the cameras? Security blocked them before they could capture anything clear. Relief washed over the king's face, followed quickly by something darker. Regret, perhaps. Or shame, good Charles murmured. That's good. Dr. Okafor sat back on her heels, frustration etched into every line of her face. Your Majesty, with all due respect, this is the 3rd time this month. You can't keep ignoring this. James's blood ran cold. 3rd time. Charles closed his eyes. I'm not ignoring anything, Sarah. I'm managing it. You're not managing it? You're hiding it, because I have to. The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy, suffocating. James felt like an intruder witnessing something he shouldn't. But he couldn't move, couldn't look away. The country needs stability, Charles continued, his voice quiet but firm. They need to believe their king is strong, capable. If they know, they'll understand. Dr. Okafor interrupted. They'll support you. Will they? Charles opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling. Or will they question whether I should have ever taken the crown at all? Silence settled over them like a shroud. Finally, Dr. Okafor stood. I'll give you something for the dizziness. But this is temporary. You need real treatment. Soon. I know. She pulled a small bottle from her medical bag, shook out 2 pills, and handed them to the king, along with a bottle of water. Charles swallowed them without complaint. I'll tell the security team you felt faint from dehydration, Dr. Okafor said. But you're not going back out there today. We'll say you need rest. The ceremony can be rescheduled. Charles sighed, defeated. Fine. Dr. Okafor turned to James. You saved his life today, Corporal. But what you heard, what you said, doesn't leave this room. Understood? James nodded. Yes, ma'am. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether she could trust him. Then she nodded and walked toward the corridor, speaking quietly into her phone. James stood frozen, his mind spinning. 3rd time. Real treatment. Hiding something? What was wrong with the king? Charles's voice broke through his thoughts. Corporal Henley, isn't it? Yes, Your Majesty. Come here. James stepped closer, his heart pounding. Charles looked up at him, his eyes tired but clear. You risked your career-breaking formation. Why? I just reacted, sir. Instinct. Yes, Charles smiled faintly. Good instincts. He paused, then added, I need you to do something for me. James's stomach twisted. Anything, sir? I need you to trust me. And I need you to keep a secret. I will. Even if it costs you everything. James didn't hesitate. Yes, the king studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then you need to know the truth. The truth, as it turned out, was worse than James could have imagined. King Charles sat up slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the bench for support. Dr. Okafor had left to handle the media and security, leaving James alone with the monarch and the dim, echoing space of the abbey. "I'm dying," Charles said simply. The words hit James like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure what to say. What could anyone say to that? "The doctors gave me 6 months," Charles continued, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "That was 4 months ago." James felt the floor tilt beneath him. "But they can treat it, can't they? Surgery, therapy, they can try. But the treatment would take me out of public life for months, maybe longer, and there's no guarantee it would work." Charles looked down at his hands. "I've spent my entire life waiting to be king. 73 years preparing for this role. And now that I finally have it, I'm being asked to choose between my duty and my life. That's not a choice, sir. Your life is not just mine anymore." Charles's eyes met his, fierce and unwavering. "Every decision I make affects millions of people. The stability of the government, the confidence of the nation, the future of the monarchy itself." James shook his head. "But if I die, William takes the throne. He's ready. He's strong. The transition will be sad, but smooth." Charles stood slowly, testing his balance. "But if I step down for treatment and it doesn't work, I'll have caused a crisis for nothing. The country will have gone through the turmoil of transition twice in a matter of months." "So you're just giving up?" "I'm making a choice." Charles walked toward the stained glass window, where colored light painted the floor in shades of blue and gold. "My mother reigned for 70 years. She never wavered, never showed weakness, never put her own needs before her duty. That's what it means to be a monarch." James felt anger rising in his chest. "With respect, sir, that's not duty. That's suicide." Charles turned, surprised by the bluntness. James didn't back down. "You talk about stability and confidence? What happens when you collapse during a speech? Or fall down the steps of Buckingham Palace in front of 1,000 cameras? You think that won't cause a crisis? That's why I need your help." The words hung between them. "What?" James asked. "You caught me today before anyone could see. You were faster than my security detail. Faster than anyone." Charles stepped closer. "I need someone like you close by. Someone I can trust. Someone who can act in a split second if this happens again." "Sir, I'm just a guardsman. I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone in my current detail because you've already done it." Charles's expression softened. "James, I'm not asking you to keep me alive forever. I'm asking you to help me finish what I started. These last 2 months, I have commitments. Important ones. A treaty signing. A memorial dedication. A visit to hospitals where children are fighting for their lives." His voice cracked slightly. "Quite a matter before I go. I want to know that my time as king meant something. Can you understand that?" James looked at this man, this king standing before him, vulnerable and determined in equal measure. Every instinct told him this was wrong, that the king should fight for his life, not against time. But he also saw the resolve in Charles's eyes. The quiet courage of a man who had made his peace with death and was choosing how to face it. "Yes, sir," James said quietly. "I understand, then you'll help me." James thought of his own father, who had died of cancer when James was 16. He remembered the hospital rooms, the treatments that stole his father's strength and dignity. He remembered his father saying, one night near the end, that he wished he'd spent his final days living instead of dying. "I'll help you," James said. "But on one condition." Charles raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating with your king?" "I'm negotiating with a man who's asking me to lie to my country." A ghost of a smile crossed Charles's face. "Fair enough. What's your condition? If it gets worse, if you're putting yourself or others in danger, you'll seek treatment. No arguments." Charles considered this, then extended his hand. Deal. They shook, and in that moment a secret pact was sealed. A guardsman and a king, bound by trust and an impossible promise. What do we do now? James asked. Oh? Charles said, straightening his jacket. You get reassigned to my personal protection detail. Dr. O'Coffer will arrange it. And I go back to work. The media will be told I had a momentary dizzy spell from skipping breakfast. Nothing to worry about. Charles walked toward the door, then paused. James? Yes, sir? Thank you. For catching me today? In more ways than one. Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadowed corridor, leaving James alone with the weight of a secret that could change everything. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of living a double life to the world. Corporal James Henley was simply another face in the King's security detail, professional, invisible, unremarkable. But behind closed doors, he had become something else entirely. A guardian. A confidant. The only person besides Dr. Okafor who knew the truth, and every day. The truth became harder to hide. Charles had good days and bad days. On good days, he was every inch the King's sharp, gracious, commanding. He attended ceremonies, met with dignitaries, visited schools and hospitals. The cameras loved him. The people loved him. On bad days, James watched the King struggle to tie his own shoes. Watched him grip tables and chairs when dizziness hit. Watched him pop pills in private before walking out to smile for the crowds. James learned to read the signs. The slight pallor in Charles's cheeks. The way his left hand trembled when he was tired. The pause just a second too long before he spoke, as if gathering strength, and James was always ready. He positioned himself at every event with calculated precision. Always within 6 feet. Always watching. 3 times in those 3 weeks, he caught Charles before a stumble became a fall. Twice he steadied the King with a hand on his elbow that looked casual but wasn't. He created a distraction when Charles needed a moment to recover, loudly pointing out a security concern that didn't exist. No one noticed. Or so he thought. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Charles was visiting a children's hospital in Manchester, the kind of event he loved most. The children didn't care about protocols or politics. They just wanted to show the King their drawings and tell him about their favorite cartoons. James stood near the doorway of the playroom, watching Charles kneel beside a little girl in a wheelchair. She couldn't have been more than 7, her head wrapped in a bright pink scarf. She was showing the King a picture she'd drawn a castle with a crooked tower and a smiling sun. "That's brilliant," Charles said warmly. "Is that where you live?" The girl giggled. "No, silly. That's your house." Charles laughed, a real, genuine laugh that made everyone in the room smile. For a moment, James forgot about the secret. Forgot about the illness. This was why Charles was fighting so hard. For moments like this, but then he saw it. The warning sign. Charles's hand, resting on the arm of the girl's wheelchair, had started to tremble. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes lost focus for just a fraction of a second. James moved. He crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside the King as if to admire the drawing too. "That's beautiful," he said to the girl, his voice warm. Then, quietly to Charles, "Sir, we're running late for the next appointment." Charles blinked, clarity returning. "Already?" "Yes, sir." The King turned back to the girl, his smile never wavering. "I have to go now, but I want you to keep drawing, all right? You're very talented. Will you come back?" "I promise I'll try." The girl beamed, and Charles stood with James's subtle support. To anyone watching, it looked like 2 men simply rising together. No one saw the way Charles leaned on James's arm. No one noticed the way James braced himself to take the King's full weight. They walked toward the exit. The hospital staff and photographers following. Flashbulbs went off. Questions were called out. Charles waved, gracious as ever. And then they were in the hallway. Away from the cameras, Charles sagged against the wall. "Your Majesty, I'm fine," Charles breathed. "Just give me a moment." Dr. Okafor appeared from nowhere, her face tight with concern. She'd been shadowing all of Charles's appearances, staying just out of sight. "How bad?" Manageable, Charles said, though his face told a different story. She pulled out her medical kit, checking his pulse, his eyes. Your blood pressure is dropping. You need to stop for today. I have 2 more stops. Then cancel them. I can't. One of them is the war memorial dedication. Those veterans have been planning this for months. I won't let them down. Dr. Okafor and James exchanged a look. They both knew that tone. There was no arguing with it. Fine, Dr. Okafor said tightly. But after that, you're done. No arguments. Charles nodded, accepting the compromise. They made it through the memorial dedication. Barely. Charles spoke about sacrifice and duty, his voice strong despite the weakness in his body. The veterans saluted. A bugler played taps. And through it all, James stood 3 feet away, ready to move the instant something went wrong. It was in the car ride back to London that Charles finally broke. They were alone in the back of the Bentley, the privacy screen up between them and the driver. James sat across from the king, watching him stare out the window at the countryside rushing past. I saw you watching me, Charles said suddenly. James tensed. Sir? In the hospital? You knew before I did that something was wrong. You were moving before I even felt the dizziness start. Charles turned from the window, his eyes meeting James's. How? Training, I suppose? No, it's more than that. Charles leaned forward. You care. The words struck James harder than he expected. Of course I care, sir. It's my job to protect you, that's not what I mean. Charles smiled sadly. Most of the people around me care about the king, the institution, the symbol, but you. You care about the man, don't you? James didn't know how to answer that, so he told the truth. Yes, sir. I do. Charles sat back, nodding slowly. My father was like that. Cared too much about people. My mother always said it was his greatest weakness and his greatest strength. He paused. I think she was right. Silence filled the car. Then Charles spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not going to make it to the end, James. Don't say that. I can feel it. The pills aren't working as well anymore. The dizzy spells are lasting longer, coming more frequently. Now Charles closed his eyes. I thought I had 2 months left, but I don't think I have 2 weeks. James felt his chest tighten. I need you to promise me something, Charles said. Anything. When it happens, when I finally fall and don't get back up, I need you to make sure William is ready. Tell him I'm proud of him. Tell him he'll be a better king than I ever was. Sir, promise me. James's throat burned. I promise. Charles opened his eyes, and in them James saw not a king, but a father. A man who had carried an impossible weight his entire life and was finally ready to set it down. Thank you, Charles whispered, and in that moment, James realized something that terrified him. He wasn't just protecting a king anymore. He was watching. A friend prepared to die. The call came at 2 a.m. James woke to his phone, vibrating on the nightstand. Dr. Okafor's name glowing on the screen. His heart sank before he even answered. It's happening, she said, without preamble. Get to Windsor. Now. James was dressed and out the door in 4 minutes. The roads were empty at this hour, streetlights casting orange pools on the pavement as he drove through the darkness. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to hurt. This was it. The moment Charles had warned him about, he arrived at Windsor Castle to find it lit up like a beacon against the night sky. Security waved him through without question. They knew his clearance now. Inside, a butler led him through silent corridors to the king's private chambers. Dr. Okafor met him at the door. How bad? James asked. He collapsed an hour ago. In his study. Alone, thankfully. Her voice was clinical, but her eyes betrayed her worry. I've stabilized him, but his body is shutting down. The cancer has spread faster than we thought. Does William know? Not yet. Charles doesn't want him called until morning. He says he doesn't want his son to see him like this if he can help it. James pushed past her into the room. Charles lay in a massive 4-poster bed, looking impossibly small beneath royal blue blankets. And the 4th drip-fed into his arm. Monitoring equipment beeped softly beside him. His face was pale, his breathing labored, but his eyes were open.
Ace.
He said, his voice a rasp. You came, of course I came. James pulled a chair to the bedside, sitting down heavily. What were you thinking, working alone at 2 in the morning? Couldn't sleep. I thought I'd catch up on paperwork. A weak smile. Seemed important at the time. It's never that important. No, I suppose not. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. Did Sarah tell you? She told me.
Oh.
Then you know. This is the end of the road. James felt something crack inside his chest. You could still get treatment. It's not too late, it is. And I made my choice. Charles opened his eyes again, looking directly at James. I don't regret it. These last few weeks, I got to be the king I wanted to be. I got to matter. That's enough. It's not enough, James said fiercely. You deserve more time. You deserve life isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we do with what we're given. Charles reached out, his hand trembling. James took it, surprised by how cold it felt. I need you to do something for me. Anything. Tomorrow today, I suppose, is the ceremony at the Memorial Garden. The one for fallen soldiers. Their families will be there. The press. Everyone. Charles squeezed James's hand weakly. I want to be there. James stared at him. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, Your Majesty. You can barely sit up. How do you expect to... I'll manage. With your help? James looked at Dr. Okofer, who stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. Tell him this is insane. Already have, she said flatly. Multiple times. He won't listen. Because it matters, Charles insisted. Those families lost their children, their spouses, their parents to war. They deserve to have their king stand with them. Not send a representative. Not cancel because I'm too weak. They deserve better, and if you collapse in front of them, then you catch me, like you always do. James wanted to argue, wanted to tell the king that this was too dangerous, too reckless, that duty had its limits, but he saw the determination in Charles's eyes. The same determination that had kept him going through 3 weeks of hell, the same determination that had made him refuse. Treatment to avoid burdening his country. This wasn't about duty anymore. This was about dignity. All right, James said quietly. We'll get you there, Dr. Okafor sighed. You're both mad, probably, Charles agreed. But that's what makes it worth doing. They spent the next few hours preparing. Dr. Okafor adjusted Charles's medications, finding a delicate balance between alertness and pain management. She showed James how to recognize the warning signs, how to position himself to support the king without making it obvious. If he starts to fall, she said, don't try to catch him gently. Grab him and hold him up. The press might notice, but they'll think you're just being protective. Better that than footage of the king collapsing. James nodded, memorizing every instruction. At 6 in the morning, Charles insisted on getting dressed himself. It took him 20 minutes to put on his suit, every movement slow and deliberate. James stood nearby, ready to help, but Charles waved him off. A king dresses himself, he said stubbornly. When he finally finished, he looked in the mirror. Despite the illness, despite the exhaustion, he looked regal, distinguished, every inch a monarch. Not bad, Charles said with satisfaction. For a dying man, don't, James said sharply. Charles turned. Don't what? Don't joke about it. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Charles's expression softened. I'm sorry. You're right. He walked slowly to James, steadying himself on furniture along the way. I know this is hard on you. I know I'm asking too much. But I'm grateful. More than you know. James swallowed hard. Let's just get through today. Yes, let's. The Memorial Garden ceremony was scheduled for 11 o'clock. By 10:30, they were in the car, heading to the site. Charles sat with his eyes closed, conserving energy. Dr. Okafor rode with them, her medical kit at the ready. James watched the city pass by outside the window, his stomach churning with anxiety. This could go wrong in so many ways. One missed sign. one moment too slow, and the world would witness something that could never be taken back. The car pulled up to the memorial garden. A crowd had gathered, veterans in uniform, families holding photos of fallen loved ones, dignitaries in dark suits. Cameras lined the barriers. Charles opened his eyes. "Ready? Are you?" James asked. "No, but that's never stopped me before." The door opened. Charles stepped out, and the crowd erupted in applause. And James held his breath. Asterisk, asterisk. The sun broke through the clouds as Charles walked toward the memorial stone. It was a perfect autumn day, golden light filtering through the trees, leaves falling like gentle rain. The kind of day that made you glad to be alive. James walked 3 steps behind and to the left, his eyes never leaving the king. He watched every movement, every breath, every shift in posture, looking for the signs so far. Charles was holding steady. The memorial stone stood at the center of the garden, a massive piece of black granite engraved with thousands of names. Names of soldiers who had died in service to their country, each one representing a life cut short, a family left behind, a future that would never come. Charles reached the stone and placed his hand on it, bowing his head. The crowd fell silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking for a moment. Sensing the weight of this instant, James counted the seconds. 15, 20, 30. Charles straightened and turned to face the gathering. His face was composed, his voice steady as he began to speak. "We stand today in a garden of remembrance," Charles said. "But it is not just stone and earth we remember. It is the laughter of a child who will never know their father, the dreams of a parent who will never see their child grow old, the moments that were stolen by war." His voice carried across the garden, clear and strong. No one would guess that just hours ago he had been too weak to stand. "These names behind me are not just history," Charles continued. "They are present. They live on in the stories we tell, in the freedoms we enjoy, in the peace we must never take for granted."
Oh.
James saw it then. The slight tremor in Charles's left hand, the way his right hand gripped the podium just a bit too tight. The king was fading, but he kept speaking. About sacrifice, about duty, about the debt the living owed to the dead. And as he spoke, something remarkable happened. The veterans began to straighten in their wheelchairs. The families clutched their photos tighter. Even the hardened press photographers lowered their cameras, just listening, because they could feel it too. The weight of this moment, the sense that they were witnessing something important, something true. Charles's voice wavered for just a second, then steadied. "I may be your king, but I am also simply one more person who owes everything to those who came before, who fought, who fell, who gave their tomorrows for our today." He paused, his breath hitching slightly. James tensed, ready to move. Charles's eyes found his in the crowd. A silent message passed between them. "Not yet. Just a little longer." Charles drew himself up one final time. "And so I say to you, to these families, to these heroes, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, from the depths of my soul. Thank you." The crowd erupted in applause. Veterans saluted. People wiped tears from their eyes. And Charles smiled. But James saw the cost of that smile, saw the way Charles's knees locked to keep him upright, saw the pallor spreading across his face like frost. The king took one step away from the podium, then another. And on the third step, his body finally surrendered. James was moving before Charles even began to fall. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat, his arms catching the king's weight, holding him upright. To the crowd, it looked like an embrace between a guardsman and his king, an honor guard doing his duty. No one saw the way Charles's full weight collapsed against him. No one saw the whispered words, "Thank you." "James, thank you for letting me finish." Dr. Okafor was there in seconds, her face professionally calm, even as her hands quickly assessed Charles's condition. Security formed a circle around them, blocking the cameras. "We need to get him out of here," she said quietly. "Now, not like this," Charles murmured, his eyes barely open. "Help me walk." James looked at Dr. Okafor. She shook her head, It was too dangerous. But James understood what Charles was asking for. One last act of dignity. One last moment of strength. "Hold on to me," James said. "We'll walk together." With James supporting most of his weight, Charles straightened. They walked slowly back to the car, James's arm around the king's waist, hidden from view by their body's angle. To the crowd, it simply looked like two men walking side by side. A king and his protector. Nothing unusual. They made it to the car. The door closed behind them, and only then did Charles finally let go. "Hospital," Dr. Okafor ordered the driver. "No," Charles said, his voice barely audible. "Windsor. I want to go home, Your Majesty, Sarah. Please. We both know what comes next. Let me die at home. In my own bed, not under hospital lights." Dr. Okafor's professional mask finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. "All right, Windsor." The drive back was silent, except for the beeping of the portable monitor Dr. Okafor had attached to Charles's chest. James held the king's hand the entire way, feeling it grow colder with each passing mile. "Did I do it right?" Charles asked suddenly, his eyes still closed. "Yes, sir," James said, his voice thick. "You did it perfectly. Good. That's good." Charles opened his eyes, looking at James. "You'll tell William?" "About today." "About all of it?" "I promise. Tell him. Tell him being king isn't about the crown. It's about the moments when you choose to be there for people. Even when it costs you everything. I will." Charles smiled faintly. "You're a good man, James Henley. I'm glad you were the one who caught me." They reached Windsor just as the sun began to set. James helped carry Charles to his chambers, laying him gently in the same bed where this day had begun. Dr. Okafor set up more equipment, but they all knew it was just for comfort now. Prince William arrived within the hour, his face stricken when he saw his father. Charles managed to stay awake long enough to speak with his son privately. James and Dr. Okafor waited outside, listening to the murmur of voices through the door. When William emerged 20 minutes later, his eyes were red, but his expression was calm. He looked at James. "Told me what you've done." "Thank you." James could only nod. William went back inside, and moments later, the monitors began to alarm. Dr. Okafor rushed in. James started to follow, but she held up her hand. "Let them have this moment," she said gently. "Father and son." So James stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, listening to the sounds of a family saying goodbye. The monitors fell silent 20 minutes later. King Charles had died at home, surrounded by love, having given everything for one final moment of dignity. The news broke an hour later. The country mourned. The world mourned. But none of them knew the full story. None of them knew what it had cost him to stand at that memorial, to speak those final words, to walk one last time with his head held high. Only 3 people knew the truth. Dr. Okafor, who had watched a patient become a friend. Prince William, who had lost a father but gained understanding. And James, who had caught a king and learned what true courage looked like. In the days that followed, James returned to his regular duties. The funeral came and went with all the ceremony and pageantry expected of a monarch. William became King William V. The country moved forward, as countries always do. But James carried the secret with him, and sometimes late at night, he would remember the way Charles had looked at that memorial. The strength in his voice, the gratitude in his eyes. A king who chose to spend his final breaths standing with those who had given everything. And James understood, finally, what Charles had been trying to teach him all along. That duty wasn't about rules or protocol or tradition. It was about showing up, being present, choosing to stand with people in their moments of pain and triumph, even when it costs you everything. It was about being caught when you fall, and knowing that you won't fall alone. King Charles had taught him that, and James would never forget it.